Hello everyone, Ruby Ravel here, thrice majestic, wing-heeled wanderer of the mountainous wastes, where I go in search of my weird or my predestined fate, speaking to the Norns themselves, so I can ask them, please grant me inspiration appertaining to Mercury conjunct Saturn, so that I can disseminate it all to my beautiful YouTube followers on here. And the Norns, those three sisters sharing but one eye between them, beckoned me closer because they were all quite hunchbacked. So I had to squat down onto the ground and put my ear on level with their mouths. And they said, "Tell them this. This will really hit the spot." Okay, so let's do some creative visualization, people. Now just imagine that you are Mercury, Hermes Trismegistus himself, this wonderfully witty, wing-heeled socialite whose mind is always abuzz with a million ideas, whose very thoughts are like magic spells conjuring hidden realities into the world, who has this amazing verbal dexterity with which he can tantalize, beguile, and most importantly, mislead, because words create realities and those realities disseminate from the thoughts in which they have arisen. And you know, Mercury's busy leafing through his mail, checking his emails, looking at his inbox and his various social media accounts, because, you know, Mercury rules communication and social interaction, and he wants to make sure that he's abreast of everything going on in the world. He doesn't want to miss anything, has a terrible fear of missing out, and by God, if something interesting or curious is going on, then he wants to make sure he's going to be there. Now, he finds this confidential letter that looks very serious and austere, that is demanding it must be opened. And he's thinking to himself, well, this looks like a bit of a buzzkill. This looks like a bit of an annoyance. However, I still am very curious about what's going on inside, especially with that very austere seal of approval on the outside. I should probably open such an ostentatious letter and find out what secrets remain inside, by God. See, Mercury was so excited opening that letter that it upset all the technology and structural apparatus within a radius of, who knows, maybe a few meters, at least those meters contiguous to me and my own mercurial self. Anyway, he opens this letter, this very important letter that he can't ignore, and he finds it's from Saturn. And he thinks, oh God, not that old bore, not that miserable old curmudgeon. What could he possibly want? And he finds he's got an invitation to go to Saturn's Castle, his top headquarters, away for the weekend. Now, normally he would bypass such an offer as this, finding he has much more delightful and frivolous and easygoing mercurial pleasures and pursuits that he can engage in. But there is a threat. You have to go here, or else all of the gods will be there, everyone important will be there. If you don't go, Mercury, you will be humiliated. You have to go. So Mercury sallies forth. We all love to sally forth every now and then. I know I do, sally back and forth. He sallies forth off to Saturn's Castle, which is perched on a very strong, imposing cliff overlooking the sea. And it's even with his winged heels and his famous dexterous lightness of foot, Mercury still finds the arduous climb up to Saturn's Castle very weary and fatiguing, and he just hopes that, by God, hopefully there'll be some nice furniture I can at least recline in once I get to the top, and that it won't just all be horrible benches made of cold marble or stone. And he enters into Saturn's edifice after he's gone through a very long and tedious security check, and finds that this edifice of his seems to have been protected from all the advancements and comforts of modernity. There's no radios, there's no TVs, there's no iPhones, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no signal for a million miles around. He's completely cut off from the outside world. All there is this vast, ponderous library full of these exhaustive tomes that are very dry and dusty and obscure and difficult to read. And he's wandering through these long, cold, damp, dusky hallways for a long period of time when he realizes, where are the other gods, you know? At least I thought Aphrodite was going to be here, Hera, Hephaestus, Zeus, all the other creatures in this great Olympian pantheon. I thought there would at least be someone I could chat to, who I could share an anecdote or be a delightful raconteur with, someone who I could use as a guinea pig on which to brainstorm all my latest creative ideas and breakthroughs. Instead, there's nothing, just these cold, ungiving stone castle walls that are keeping me away from that world in which I am used to so freely roaming. And eventually he begins to realize he's been a stooge, he's been a patsy, he's been set up. So he thinks, bugger this, I'm not hanging around here all day waiting for everyone else to show up. I've got more exciting and interesting things I could be engaged with. He goes to leave, and he finds that the portcullis has come down, that everything is closed off, and that he is just stuck within this realm of Saturn for the next 12 days. And finding that he has no freedom of movement, finding that he has no one he can socialize with, no one he can interact with, no one he can share and discourse all of his great ideas with to keep his mercurial winds always abuzz, always flying, he has to turn back on himself, and faced only with himself and his own mind, feeling so separate and closed off from the world, he begins to have doubts. Am I really that smart? Am I really that clever? Am I really that interesting? Are all my passions and pursuits just frivolous pastimes that are getting me nowhere? Isn't it about time I tried to do something a bit more serious with my life instead of just buzzing around, flitting from one passing distraction to the next, you know? There was always that great book that I said I would write and still haven't gotten around to doing. There were those other projects that I thought about, and where are they now? They are in the ashtray of my other excitable ideas that stimulated me for a day and then quickly got bereft by more pressing things. And what that long-winded piece of improvised storytelling was meant to elucidate was how this transit can work. That Saturn, when he's in close conjunction with something, can often make us feel that a certain part of ourselves is being obstructed or closed off in some way. There's an area of ourself around which a wall has been put that can make us feel inadequate and bereft and cut off in a critical way. We can begin to experience strong doubts as to our intelligence, as to our ability to interact with one another. We can feel a bit closed off. Our minds can feel worn down and fatigued and not at their utmost functioning power. And this can put us in a very serious frame of mind where, rather than just enjoying going along the usual flights of our mercurial thoughts, we start thinking more about the long term, more about the future, more about the different ways in which we could invest in and capitalize upon our intellectual ideas. One of the byproducts of this aspect is that it can make us more gloomy and introspective and self-critical. We turn our lens of awareness inwards, and in so doing, we become more aware of our mental deficiencies or any weak spots that we might have in terms of our communication skills, in terms of how we process and digest, assimilate and communicate information, and how we interact with other people. It can also make us aware of any limitations that we have in terms of the skills that we don't have. And whilst being self-critical and pointing out one's deficiencies and inadequacies to oneself seldom puts us in a very cheerful frame of mind, during other transits it can be very easy to smooth over those things, just to focus on those things that make us feel agreeable or competent or powerful, to really lean into the talents and skills that we have and to ignore those areas where we feel a bit dumb or weak or stupid. But by having Mercury come into conjunction with Saturn here, it can give us the incentive to become more independent and self-sufficient in areas of knowledge and in particular skill sets where we might ordinarily feel uncomfortable and therefore lack full autonomy. Therefore, this can be a good aspect for getting strongly engaged in intellectual labor that we may have procrastinated or put off from engaging, like Mercury trapped in that castle with those dusty tomes we would rather not need. This is a good aspect for steeping oneself in history and in one's tradition and in one's heritage, in becoming accustomed to classical forms of learning rather than just focusing on the bits that we find more fun and engaging. Sometimes this aspect can create social awkwardnesses and difficulties. We might even feel just like withdrawing from our social circle altogether, preferring to invest all of our energy into work and practicality and productive achievements instead. But also when we are close with other people, we might be more conscious of the barriers that separate us. We might be conscious of some of the difficulties or some of the elephants in the room appertaining to our given relationship or friendship or connection with another person. So this aspect, whilst unpleasant, can also be an important one for having real conversations with someone, for addressing issues or obstacles that we have in our means of connecting with another person, to discuss any boundaries that we feel we need to navigate or put in place to protect and improve and refine the close connections we have with other people. Sometimes that boundary setting can necessitate us having distance from people or cutting them out of our lives completely if we feel that that connection with them is no longer bearing fruit or serving any purpose, or if we feel that that person will no longer respect our boundaries if they are in our life. This conjunction can also mark important tests, perhaps driving examinations, or important kind of administration that we have to go through in order to set up some kind of new project, career, or financial investment. Natally, someone with Saturn conjunct Mercury might describe someone who has a sense of intellectual or social ineptitude and inefficiency. They may have grown up in an environment where they were made to feel stupid, where they were made to feel that their words didn't matter, that they weren't listened to, or perhaps they lived in the shadow of an intellectually condescending father, older brother, or friendship group who are always demeaning and belittling them anytime they try to intellectually or socially distinguish themselves in some critical fashion. Alternatively, someone with this aspect may have grown up in an environment where they had very little intellectual encouragement whatsoever. Schooling may have been absent, or they just may have come into a family or social unit in which the agile usage of the mind or education were not particularly valued at all, and therefore became a source of shame and denigration. Now, if Saturn makes us feel inadequate, inferior, and wounded, and horribly, shamefully dependent in a given area, it can be responded to in one of two ways. Either we can avoid developing the area highlighted completely, or we can try and compensate for it and achieve self-mastery in that area. So someone who grows up feeling like they are stupid, that they don't know how to interact with other people, that they are socially awkward and clumsy, and anytime they try and stick words together, they just don't come apart, or perhaps who struggles with reading, or who even may be dyslexic, sometimes we might just try and avoid those issues completely. If we feel socially awkward, we just avoid socializing with people. If we don't feel very smart, then we just avoid any situation that demands that we show any kind of intellectual dominance or achievement. However, someone also may feel so ashamed of their lack of worth in these areas that they overcompensate for it. So if they don't feel like they're smart, if they don't feel like they're intelligent, if they don't feel like they are witty enough in terms of their self-expression, they might devote a huge amount of time just to excelling in these areas as much as possible. They will read all the classics. They will devour the dictionary. They will become this great intellectual and distinguish themselves as much in all these areas, becoming this social butterfly, just to try and eradicate that gnawing sense of fear and insufficiency that they have surrounding this issue. So Saturn in the natal chart can show us what does not come naturally to us, what things we can only master or excel at through hard labor and rigorous attention to detail, and the willingness to constantly self-criticize as a means of self-improvement and finesse. Anyway, all close Saturn conjunctions can often have the effect of making us feel fatigued. We have this great sense that we have so much to do, and yet we may have very little energy to do it. Right now, I'm feeling a bit fatigued and encumbered, so I'm going to cut that video short there, even though I'm sure if I had more time, which I do not, I could have expressed it in far more intricate detail. There are other videos in which I can do that, so I will leave that there for now. If any of you are looking for spiritual counseling or for astrology readings or for anything that makes the most of my own mercurial analytical skills, feel free to email me and get in touch. I will put my contact details in the link below. If you want to support my channel via Patreon so that it can become a strong Saturnian edifice that will last for generations to come, and help me buy that clifftop manor I've always dreamed of owning. Again, the link will be below. And if you have any stories relating to Mercury and Saturn, or to those of you who have any aspects between Mercury and Saturn like I do, please feel free to share them in the comments section below, and bon voyage.